Greetings and salutations. My name is Michael Schwahn, and welcome to episode number 4 of an ongoing series, First Impression. Today's impression is going to be focusing on the political epic fantasy, A Song of Ice and Fire. Now we're going to be looking at novel 1 of 7 of A Song of Ice and Fire, which is probably what the entirety of the series is now better well known as, which is titled A Game of Thrones. A Game of Thrones was created by George R.R. Martin, and the first novel was published in August of 1996. And I think at this point it's pretty well outgrown just being a novel series and is just part of mainstream media in terms of just what everything everywhere is. You can't really get away from Game of Thrones at this point in time. I mean, it's got probably one of the most watched television series in history, outside of, maybe some like really long-running sitcoms, but it's grown massively. I mean, even at the time of recording this, the final season is going to be airing in just a very short while. And my Facebook and Twitter will not shut up about it. But, that's fine. Whatever. I personally have not been invested in Game of Thrones at all. I just never really cared enough about it. And by the time that I had friends that were interested in it, there was way too much of it for me to really bother trying to drum up my own interest. It's also one of those things that on my end has just gotten a little too much hype from too many people for it to ever really be able to live up to that hype. Now that said, while I've not watched the show, any of it, or read any of the novels until today, I've obviously not been able to escape some knowledge about Game of Thrones involving a particular wedding. There's also the quotes that are said by everyone, everywhere, and have been memified all over the place. Winter is coming, you know nothing, Jon Snow, I drink and I know things, and I've been shown multiple times now a particular scene involving a character named the Hound and how he wants his fucking chickens. Which is, it's a good scene. It didn't drive me to want to watch the show, though, but it was still interesting. It actually kind of made me not want to watch it, actually. But that's beside the point. Anyway, the Game of Thrones obviously is a novel. I believe it's a comic series now if you are not interested in having to read the book or watch the show. And if you are interested, there is also an audiobook version that is going to be narrated by Roy Dotrice, and that is probably my personal recommendation on how to consume a book, because personally, trying to sit down and find time to read is very difficult, whereas if I'm like poring over spreadsheets or something, I can just pop an earbud in and listen to an audiobook that way. But I will be the one reading for you today, so I hope that's something you're interested in. If not, skip to the end and find out what I actually thought about it. Haven't decided how much I'm actually going to read, because I am also aware that the novels for Game of Thrones, every chapter is written from a different person's perspective. So I'm just going to end up kind of be playing it by ear, word, mouth, however you want to phrase it when it comes to reading a book. And we'll just see how far that goes. But anyway, there's not a whole lot else I can say at this point, so without further ado, let's begin.
Oh, all right. Well, so, if you can't already tell, things are a little bit different for this video. I mean, I went ahead with a different color scheme. We got this nice, there it is. It's nice fire over here for you. Decided we'd take something a little warmer and relax a bit, since we're going to be reading a book together, a novel, as it were. I'm also well aware that my energy between like the intro and what this outro is going to be to this is just going to be severely, widely different. But that's okay. In any case, so I do have A Game of Thrones, this is book 1 of A Song of Ice and Fire. Come on, seriously. And I'll save that for later. Anyway, as I said during the intro, I'm not sure how far we're reading. I do know that each chapter is from a different character's perspective. I borrowed this from my mom. So thanks, Mom. I appreciate you and I love you. I have not read out loud in quite some time. So, in any case, everybody, if you want to get by the fire, and we will go ahead and get started. So, it says this one is for Melinda. Got a couple little maps in here. Prologue. We should start back. Wow, already I don't even know how to pronounce this first name. We should start back, Garrett urged, as the woods began to grow dark around them. The wildlings are dead. Do the dead frighten you? Sir Waymar Royce asked, with just the hint of a smile. Garrett did not rise to the bait. He was an old man, past 50, and he had seen the lordlings come and go. Dead is dead, he said. We have no business with the dead. Are they dead? Royce asked softly. What proof have we? Will saw them, Garrett said. If he says they are dead, that's proof enough for me. Will had known they would drag him into the quarrel sooner or later. He wished it had been later rather than sooner. My mother told me that dead men sing no songs, he put in. My wet nurse said the same thing, Will, Roy replied. Never believe anything you hear at a woman's tit. All right. There are things to be learned even from the dead, his voice echoed, too loud in the twilit forest. We have a long ride before us, Garrett pointed out. 8 days, maybe 9, and night is falling. Sir Waymar Royce glanced at the sky with disinterest. It does that every day about this time. Are you unmanned by the... Unmanned? Oh, yeah. Are you unmanned by the dark, Garrett? Will could see the tightness around Garrett's mouth, the barely suppressed anger in his eyes under the thick black hood of his cloak. Garrett had spent 40 years in the Night's Watch, man and boy, and he was not accustomed to being made light of. Yet it was more than that. Under the wounded pride, Will could sense something else in the older man. You could taste it. A nervous tension that came perilously close to fear. Will shared his unease. He had been 4 years on the wall. The first time he had been sent beyond, all the old stories had come rushing back, and his bowels had turned to water. He had laughed about it afterwards. He was a veteran of 100 rangings by now, and the endless dark wilderness that the Southern called the Haunted Forest had no more terrors for him. The Southern? Okay. Until tonight. Something was different tonight. There was an edge to this darkness that made his hackles rise. 9 days they had been riding, north and northwest, and then north again, farther and farther from the wall, hard on the track of a band of wildling raiders. Each day had been worse than the day that had come before it. Today was the worst of all. A cold wind was blowing out of the north, and it made the trees rustle like living things. All day, Will had felt as though something were watching him, something cold and implacable that loved him not. Garrett had felt it too. Will wanted nothing so much as to ride hellbent for the safety of the wall, but that was not a feeling to share with your commander, especially not a commander like this one. Sir Waymar Royce was the youngest son of an ancient house with too many heirs. He was a handsome youth of 18, gray-eyed and graceful and slender as a knife. Mounted on his huge black destrier, I know I got that wrong, the knight towered above Will and Garrett on their smaller garrons. He wore black leather boots, black woolen pants, black moleskin gloves, and a fine supple coat of gleaming black ringmail over layers of black wool and boiled leather. Sir Waymar had been a sworn brother of the Night's Watch for less than half a year, but no one could say he had not prepared for his vocation, at least insofar as his wardrobe was concerned. His cloak was his crowning glory, sable, thick, and black and soft as sin. Bet he killed them all himself, he did, Garrett told the barracks over wine. Twisted their heads off, our mighty warrior. They had all shared the laugh. Even I laughed. It is hard to take orders from a man you laughed at in your cups, Will reflected as he sat shivering atop his garron. Garrett must have felt the same. Mormont said we should track them, and we did, Garrett said. They're dead. They shan't trouble us no more. There's hard riding before us. I don't like this weather. If it snows, we could be a fortnight getting back, and snow's the best we can hope for. Ever seen an ice storm, my lord? The lordling seemed not to hear him. He studied the deepening twilight in that half-bored, half-distracted way he had. Will had ridden with the knight long enough to understand that it was best not to interrupt him when he looked like that. Tell me again what you saw, Will. All the details. Leave nothing out. Will had been a hunter before he joined the Night's Watch. Well, the poacher, in truth. Malister's freeriders had caught him red-handed in the Malister's own woods, skinning one of the Malister's own bucks, and it had been a choice of putting him on the block or losing a hand. No one could move through the woods as silent as Will, and it had not taken the Black brothers long to discover his talent. The camp is 2 miles farther on, over that ridge, hard behind us beside... Ooh, jeez. The camp is 2 miles farther on, over that ridge, hard beside a stream, Will said. I got close as I dared. There's 8 of them, men and women both. No children I could see. They put up a lean-to against a rock. The snow's pretty well covered it now, but I could still make it out. No fire burning, but the fire pit was still plain as day. No one moving. I watched a long time. No living man ever lay so still. Did you see any blood? Well, no, Will admitted. Did you see any weapons? Some swords, a few bows. One man had an axe, never looking, double-bladed, a cruel piece of iron. It was on the ground beside him, right by his hand. Did you make note of the position of the bodies? Will shrugged. A couple are sitting against the rock, most of them on the ground, fallen-like. Or sleeping, Royce suggested. Fallen, Will insisted. There's one woman up in Ironwood, half hid in the branches, a Far Eyes. He smiled thinly. I took care she never saw me. When I got closer, I saw that she wasn't moving either. Despite himself, he shivered. You have a chill? Royce asked. Some, Will muttered. The wind, my lord. The young knight turned back to his grizzled man-at-arms. Frost-fallen leaves whispered past them, and Royce's destrier moved restlessly. What do you think? Might have killed these men, Garrett? Sir Waymar asked casually. He adjusted the drape of his long sable cloak. It was the cold, Garrett said with iron certainty. I saw men freeze last winter, and the one before, when I was half a boy. Everyone talks about snows 40 foot deep and how the ice wind comes howling at the north. But the real enemy is the cold. It steals up on you quieter than will, and at first shiver and your teeth chatter, and you stamp your feet and dream of mulled wine and nice hot fires. It burns, it does. Nothing burns like the cold, but only for a while. Then it gets inside you and starts to fill you up. After a while, you don't have the strength to fight it. It's easier just to sit down or to go to sleep. They say you don't feel any pain towards the end. First you go weak and drowsy, and everything starts to fade. And then it's like sinking into a sea of warm milk. Peaceful-like. Such eloquence, Garrett, Sir Waymar observed. I never suspected you had it in you. I've had the cold in me too, lordling. Garrett pulled back his hood, giving Sir Waymar a good long look at the stumps where his ears had been. 2 ears, 3 toes, and the little finger on my left hand. I got off light. We found my brother frozen at his watch with a smile on his face. Sir Waymar shrugged. You ought to dress more warmly, Garrett. Garrett glared at the lordling. The scars around his ear holes flushed red with anger where Maester Aemon had cut the ears away. We'll see how warm you can dress when the winter comes. He pulled up his hood and hunched over his Garen, silent and sullen. If Garen said it was cold, Will began. Have you drawn any watches this past week, Will? Yes, my lord. There was never a week when he did not draw a dozen bloody watches. What was the man driving at? And how did you find the wall? Weeping, Will said, frowning. He saw it clear enough now that the lordling had pointed it out. They couldn't have froze. Not if the wall was weeping. It wasn't cold enough. Royce nodded. Bright lad. We've had a few light frosts this past week, and a quick flurry of snow now and then. Surely no cold fierce enough to kill 8 grown men clad in fur and leather. Let me remind you, with shelter near at hand and the means of making fire. The knight's smile was cocksure. Will, lead us there. I would see these dead men for myself. And then there was nothing to be done for it. The order had been given, and honor bound them to obey. Will went in front, his shaggy little Garen picking the way carefully through the undergrowth. The light snow had fallen the night before, and there were stones and roots and hidden sinks laying just under its crust, waiting for the careless and the unwary. Sir Waymar Royce came next, his great black destrier snorting impatiently. The warhorse was the wrong mount for ranging, but try to tell that to the lordling. Garrett brought up the rear. The old man-at-arms muttered to himself as he rode. Twilight deepened. The cloudless sky turned a deep purple, the color of an old bruise, then faded to black. The stars began to come out. A half-moon rose. Will was grateful for the light. "We can make a better pace than this, surely," Royce said when the moon was full risen. "Not with this horse," Will said. Fear had made him insolent. Perhaps my lord would care to take the lead." Sir Waymar Royce did not deign to reply. Somewhere off in the wood, a wolf howled. Will pulled the Garen over beneath an ancient gnarled ironwood and dismounted. "Why are we stopping?" Sir Waymar asked. "Best to go the rest of the way on foot, my lord. It's just over that ridge." Royce paused a moment, staring off into the distance, his face reflective. A cold wind whispered through the trees. His great sable cloak stirred behind like something half alive. "There's something wrong here," Garrett muttered. The young knight gave him a disdainful smile. "Is there?" "Can't you feel it?" Garrett asked. "Listen to the darkness." Will could feel it. 4 years in the Night's Watch and he had never been so afraid. What was it? Sorry. Wind. Trees rustling. A wolf. Which sound is it that unmans you? Oh, yeah, I'm reading in the wrong person's voice. Wind, trees rustling, a wolf? Which sound is it that unmans you so, Garrett? When Garrett did not answer, Royce slid gracefully from his saddle. He tied the destrier securely to a low-hanging limb, well away from the other horses, and drew his longsword from its sheath. Jewels glittered in its hilt, and the moonlight ran down the shining steel. It was a splendid weapon, castle-forged, and new-made from the look of it. Will doubted it had ever been swung in anger. "The trees press close here," Will warned. "That sword will tangle you up, my lord. Better a knife." "If I need instruction, I will ask for it," the young lord said. "Garrett, stay here. Guard the horses." Garrett dismounted. "We need a fire. I'll set to it." "How big a fool are you, old man? If there are enemies in this wood, a fire is the last thing we want." "There's some enemies a fire will keep away," Garrett said. "Bears and direwolves and other things." Sir Waymar's mouth became a hard line. "No fire." Garrett's hood shadowed his face, but Will could see the hard glitter in his eye as he stared at the knight. For a moment he was afraid the older man would go for his sword. It was a short, ugly thing, its grip discolored by sweat, its edge nicked from hard use. But Will would have given an iron bob for the lordling's life if Garrett pulled it from its scabbard. Finally, Garrett looked down. "No fire," he muttered, low under his breath. Roy took it as acquiescence and turned away. "Lead on," he said to Will. Will threaded their way through a thicket, then started up the slope to the low ridge where he had found his vantage point under a sentinel tree. Under the thin crust of snow, the ground was damp and muddy, slick footing, with rocks and hidden roots to trip you up. Will made no sound as he climbed. Behind him he heard the soft metal slither of the lordling's ringmail, the rustle of leaves, the muttered curses as reaching branches grabbed at his longsword and tugged on his splendid sable cloak. The great sentinel was right there at the top of the ridge, where Will had known it would be, its lowest branches a bare foot off the ground. Will slid in underneath, flat on his belly in the snow and the mud, and looked down on the empty clearing. His heart stopped in his chest. For a moment he dared not breathe. Moonlight shone down on the clearing, the ashes of the fire pit, the snow-covered lean-to, the great rock, the little half-frozen stream. Everything was just as it had been a few hours ago. They were gone. All the bodies were gone. "Gods!" he heard behind him.
A sword slashed at a branch, and Sir Waymar Royce gained the ridge. He stood there against the sentinel, long sword in hand, his cloak billowing behind him as the wind came up, outlined nobly against the stars for all to see. "Get down!" Will whispered urgently. "Something's wrong!" Royce did not move. He looked down at the empty clearing and laughed. "Your dead men seem to have moved camp, Will." Will's voice abandoned him. He groped for words that did not come. It was not possible. His eyes swept back and forth over the abandoned campsite, stopped on the axe. A huge double-bladed battle axe still lying where he had seen it last, untouched, a valuable weapon. "On your feet, Will," Sir Waymar commanded. "There's no one here. I won't have you hiding under a bush." Reluctantly, Will obeyed. Sir Waymar looked him over with open disapproval. "I am not going back to Castle Black a failure on my first ranging. We will find these men." He glanced around. "Up the tree. Be quick about it. Look for a fire." Will turned away, wordless. There was no use to argue. The wind was moving. It cut right through him. He went to the tree, a vaulting gray-green sentinel, and began to climb. Soon his hands were sticky with sap and he was lost among the needles. Fear filled his gut like a meal he could not digest. He whispered a prayer to the nameless gods of the wood and slipped his dirk free from its sheath. He put it between his teeth to keep both hands free for climbing. The taste of cold iron in his mouth gave him comfort. Down below, the lordling called out suddenly, "Who goes there?" Will heard uncertainty in the challenge. He stopped climbing. He listened. He watched. The woods gave answer. The rustle of leaves, the icy rush of the stream, a distant hoot of a snow owl. The others made no sound. Will saw movement from the corner of his eye, pale shapes gliding through the woods. He turned his head, glimpsed a white shadow in the darkness. Then it was gone. Branches stirred gently in the wind, scratching at one another with wooden fingers. Will opened his mouth to call down a warning, and the words seemed to freeze in his throat. Perhaps he was wrong. Perhaps it had only been a bird, a reflection on the snow, some trick of the moonlight. What had he seen after all? "Will, where are you?" Sir Waymar called up. "Can you see anything?" He was turning in a slow circle, suddenly wary, his sword in hand. He must have felt them, as Will felt them. There was nothing to see. "Answer me! Why is it so cold?" It was cold. Shivering, Will clung more tightly to his perch, his face hard pressed against the trunk of the sentinel. He could feel the sweat, the sweet, sticky sap on his cheek. A shadow emerged from the dark of the woods. It stood in front of Royce. Tall it was, and gaunt and hard as old bones, with flesh pale as milk. Its armor seemed to change color as it moved. Here it was white as new-fallen snow, there black as shadow. Everywhere dappled the deep gray-green of the trees. The patterns ran like moonlight on water with every step it took. Will heard the breath go out of Sir Waymar Royce in a long hiss. "Come no farther," the lordling warned. His voice cracked like a boy's. I tried. He threw the long sable cloak back over his shoulders to free his arms for battle and took his sword in both hands. The wind had stopped. It was very cold. The other slid forward on silent feet. In its hand was a long sword like none that Will had ever seen. No human metal had gone into the forging of that blade. It was alive with moonlight, translucent, a shard of crystal so thin that it seemed almost to vanish when seen edge on. There was a faint blue shimmer to the thing, a ghost light that played around its edges, and somehow Will knew it was sharper than any razor. Sir Waymar met him bravely. "Dance with me, then!" He lifted his sword high over his head, defiant. His hands trembled from the weight of it, or perhaps from the cold. Yet in that moment, Will thought, he was a boy no longer, but a man of the Night's Watch. The other halted. Will saw its eyes, blue, deeper and bluer than any human eyes, a blue that burned like ice. They fixed on the long sword, trembling on high, watched the moonlight running cold along the metal. For a heartbeat, he dared to hope. They emerged silently from the shadows, twins to the first. 3 of them, 4, 5. Sir Waymar may have felt the cold that came with them, but he never saw them, never heard them. Will had to call out. It was his duty, and his death if he did. He shivered and hugged the tree and kept the silence. The pale sword came shivering through the air. Sir Waymar met it with steel. When the blades met, there was no ring of metal on metal, only a high, thin sound at the edge of hearing, like an animal screaming in pain. Royce checked a second blow and a third, then fell back. Another flurry of blows, and he fell back again. Behind him, to the right, to left, all around him, the watchers stood patient, faceless, silent, the shifting patterns of their delicate armor making them all but invisible in the wood, yet they made no move to interfere. Again and again the swords met, until Will wanted to cover his ears against the strange anguish keening of their clash. Sir Waymar was panting from the efforts now, his breath steaming in the moonlight. His blade was white with frost. The others danced with pale blue light. Then Royce's parry came a beat too late. The pale sword bit through the ring mail beneath his arm. The young lord cried out in pain. Blood welled from beneath the rings. It steamed in the cold, and the droplets seemed red as fire where they touched the snow. Sir Waymar's fingers brushed his side. His moleskin glove came away soaked with red. The other said something in a language that Will did not know. His voice was like the cracking of ice on a winter lake, and the words were mocking. Sir Waymar Royce found his fury. "For Robert!" he shouted. Then he came up snarling, lifting the frost-covered longsword with both hands and swinging it around in a flat sidearm slash with all the weight behind it. The other's parry was almost lazy. When the blades touched, the steel shattered. A scream echoed through the forest night, and the longsword shivered into 100 brittle pieces, the shards scattering like the rain of needles. Royce went to his knees, shrieking, and covered his eyes. Blood welled between his fingers. The watchers moved forward together, as if some signal had been given. Swords rose and fell, all in a deathly silence. It was a cold butchery. The pale blades sliced through ring mail as if it were silk. Will closed his eyes. Far beneath him he heard their voices, and laughter sharp as icicles. When he found the courage to look again, a long time had passed, and the ridge below was empty. He stayed in the tree, scarce daring to breathe, while the moon crept slowly across the black sky. Finally, his muscles cramping and his fingers numb with cold, he climbed down. Royce's body lay face down in the snow. One arm outflung, the thick sable cloak had been slashed in a dozen pieces. Lying dead like that, you saw how young he was. A boy. He found what was left of the sword a few feet away, the end splintered and twisted like a tree struck by lightning. Will knelt, looked around warily, and snatched it up. The broken sword would be his proof. Garrett would know what to make of it, and if not him, then surely that old Bear Mormont or Maester Aemon. Would Garrett still be waiting with the horses? He had to hurry. Will rose. Sir Waymar Royce stood over him. His fine clothes were a tatter, his face a ruin. A shard from his sword transfixed the blind white pupil of his left eye. The right eye was open. The pupil burned blue. It saw. The broken sword fell from nerveless fingers. Will closed his eyes to pray. Long, elegant hands brushed his cheek, then tightened around his throat. They were gloved in the finest moleskin and sticky with blood, yet the touch was icy cold. That's just a prologue. Ooh. I'm gonna have to pick a different position. Well, that was a pretty good prologue. Also, I'm going to give a shout out to audiobook artists. The audiobook narrator for A Game of Thrones is Roy Batrice, I believe is his last name. I said it in the intro. Because, like, reading is one thing, but most audiobook artists, they do different voices for all the characters. And they're consistent. I tried to do 3 different ones and failed. Alright. So that was the prologue. But that's not an introduction. We at least have to do the first actual chapter. Which, the chapters aren't numbered. and I understand that the chapters are just each individual characters and what's happening to them. Prologue was good, although outside of maybe if Gerard survived or there is nothing to keep us going there. But we'll move on. The first chapter is on Bran, which I believe is, if I remember correctly, is this guy. The dude that Sean Bean plays. Spoiler alert, he's played by Sean Bean. You should know what that means. Alright. The morning had dawned clear and cold, with a crispness that hinted at the end of summer. They set forth at daybreak to see a man beheaded, 20 in all, and Bran rode among them, nervous with excitement. Actually, I think this dude's name is Ed. Whatever, doesn't matter. We'll be introduced to people as we go. The man had been taken... Oh, wait, I skipped ahead. Apologies. This was the first time he had been deemed old enough to go with his lord father and his brothers to see the king's justice done. It was the 9th year of summer, and the 7th of Bran's life. The man had been taken outside a small holdfast in the hills. Robb thought he was a wildling, his sword sworn to Mance Rayder. Wow, okay. The king beyond the wall. It made Bran's skin prickle. Okay, Bran is a 7-year-old boy. Something tells me he's not Sean Bean. It made Bran's skin prickle to think of it. He remembered the Hearth's Tale's old Nan. Wow, that's a weird sentence. He remembered the Hearth's Tale's old Nan told them. The wildlings were cruel men, she said, slavers and slayers and thieves. They consorted with giants and ghouls, stole girl children in the dead of night, and drank blood from polished horns. As their women lay with the others in the long night to sire terrible half-human children. But the man they found, bound hand and foot to the holdfast wall awaiting the king's justice, was old and scrawny, not much taller than Robb. He had lost both ears and a finger to frostbite, and he dressed all in black, the same as the brother of the Night's Watch, except that his furs were ragged and greasy, as we found Gerard. The breath of man and horse mingled, steaming in the cold morning air as his lord father had the man cut down from the wall and dragged before them. Robb and Jon sat tall and still on their horses, with Bran between them on his pony, trying to seem older than 7, trying to pretend that he'd seen all this before. A faint wind blew through the holdfast gate. Over their heads flapped the banner of the Starks of Winterfell, a grey direwolf racing across an ice-white field. Bran's father sat solemnly on his horse, long brown hair stirring in the wind. His closely trimmed beard was shot with white, making him look older than his 35 years. He had a grim cast to his eyes this day, and he seemed not all the man who would sit before the fire in the evening and talk softly of the age of heroes and the children of the forest. He had taken off father's face, Bran thought, and donned the face of Lord Stark of Winterfell. There were questions asked, and answers given there in the chill of morning, but afterward Bran could not recall much of what had been said. Finally his lord father gave a command, and 2 of his guardsmen dragged the ragged man to the ironwood stump in the center square. They forced his head down onto the hard black wood. Lord Eddard Stark dismounted, and his ward Theon Greyjoy brought forth the sword. Ice, that sword was called. It was as wide as a man's head and taller even than Robb. The blade was Valyrian steel, spell-forged and dark as smoke. Nothing held an edge like Valyrian steel. His father peeled off his gloves and handed them to Jory Castle, the captain of his household guard. He took hold of Ice with both hands and said, "In the name of Robert and the House Baratheon, the first of his name, King of the Andals, and the Roymar and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm, by the word of Eddard of the House Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, I do sentence you to die." He lifted the greatsword high above his head. Bran's bastard brother Jon Snow moved closer. "Keep the pony well in hand," he whispered, "and don't look away. Father will know if you do." Bran kept his pony well in hand and did not look away. His father took off the man's head with a single sure stroke. Blood sprayed out across the snow as red as summer wine. One of the horses reared and had to be restrained to keep from bolting. Bran could not take his eyes off the blood. The snows around the stump drank it eagerly, reddening as he watched. The head bounced off a thick root and rolled. It came up near Greyjoy's feet. Theon was a lean, dark youth of 19 who found everything amusing. He laughed, put his boot on the head, and kicked it away. "Ass," Jon muttered, low enough so Greyjoy did not hear him. He put a hand on Bran's shoulder, and Bran looked over at his bastard brother. "You did well," Jon told him solemnly. Jon was 14, an old hand at justice. It seemed colder on the long ride back to Winterfell, though the wind had died by then and the sun was higher in the sky. Bran rode with his brothers well ahead of the main party. His ponies struggled hard to keep up with their horses. "The deserter died bravely," Robb said. He was big and broad and growing every day, with his mother's coloring, the fair skin, red-brown hair, and blue eyes of the Tulis of Riverrun. He had courage, at least. "No," Jon said quietly. "It was not courage. It was one dead of fear. You see it in his eyes, Stark." Jon's eyes were a gray, so dark they seemed almost black, but there was little they did not see. He was of an age with Robb, but they did not look alike. Jon was slender where Robb was muscular, dark where Robb was fair, graceful and quick where his brother was strong and fast. Robb was not impressed. "The others take his eyes," he swore. "He died well. Race you to the bridge." "Done," Jon said, kicking his horse forward. Robb cursed and followed, and they galloped down the trail, Robb laughing and hooting, Jon silent and intent. The hooves of their horses kicked up showers of snow as they went. Bran did not try to follow. His pony could not keep up. He had seen the ragged man's eyes, and he was thinking of them now. After a while, the sound of Robb's laughter receded, and the woods grew silent again. So deep in thought was he that he never heard the rest of the party until his father moved up to ride beside him. "Are you well, Bran?" he asked, not unkindly. "Yes, father," Bran told him. He looked up, wrapped in his furs and leathers, mounted on his great war-horse. His lord father loomed over him like a giant. "Robb says the man died bravely, but Jon says he was afraid." "What do you think?" his father asked. Bran thought about it. "Can a man still be brave if he's afraid?" "That is the only time a man can be brave," his father told him. "Do you understand why I did it?" "He was a wildling," Bran said. "They carry off women and sell them to the others." His lord father smiled. "Old Nan has been telling you stories again. In truth, the man was an oathbreaker, a deserter from the Night's Watch. No man is more dangerous. The deserter knows his life is forfeit if he is taken, so he will not flinch from any crime, no matter how vile. But you mistake me. The question was not why the man had to die, but why I must do it." Bran had no answer for that. "King Robert has a headsman," he said uncertainly. "He does," his father admitted, "as did the Targaryen kings before him. Yet our way is the older way. The blood of the first men still flows in the veins of the Starks, and we hold to the belief that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. If you would take a man's life, you owe it to him to look into his eyes and hear his final words. And if you cannot bear to do that, then perhaps the man does not deserve to die. One day, Bran, you will be Robb's bannerman, holding a keep of your own for your brother and your king, and justice will fall to you. When that day comes, you must take no pleasure in the task, but neither must you look away. A ruler who hides behind executioners soon forgets what death is." Man, Ed is prophetic. Profound. That was when Jon reappeared on the crest of the hill before them. He waved and shouted down at them. "Father! Bran! Come quickly! See what Robb has found!" Then he was gone again. Jory rode up beside them. "Trouble, my lord?" "Beyond a doubt," his father said. "Come, let us see what mischief my sons have rooted out now." He sent his horse into a trot. Jory and Bran and the rest came after. They found Rob on the riverbank north of the bridge, with Jon still mounted beside him. The late summer snows had been heavy this moon turn. Rob stood knee-deep in white, his hood pulled back so the sun shone in his hair. He was cradling something in his arms, while the boys talked in hushed, excited voices. The riders picked their way carefully through the drifts, groping for solid footing on the hidden, uneven ground. Jory Castle and Theon Greyjoy were the first to reach the boys. Greyjoy was laughing and joking as he rode. Bran heard the breath go out of him. "Gods!" he exclaimed, struggling to keep control of his horse as he reached for his sword. Jory's sword was already out. "Rob, get away from it!" he called as his horse reared under him. Rob grinned and looked up from the bundle in his arms. "She can't hurt you." "She's dead, Jory." Bran was afire with curiosity by then. He would have spurred the pony faster, but his father made them dismount beside the bridge and approach on foot. Bran jumped off and ran. By then, Jon, Jory, and Theon Greyjoy all had dismounted and well. "What in the seven hells is it?" Greyjoy was saying. "A wolf," Rob told him. "A freak," Greyjoy said. "Look at the size of it." Bran's heart was thumping in his chest as he pushed a waist-high drift to his brother's side. Half buried in blood-stained snow, a huge dark shape slumped in death. Ice had formed in its shaggy gray fur, and the faint smell of corruption clung to it like a woman's perfume. Bran glimpsed blind eyes crawling with maggots. Ugh. A wide mouth full of yellow teeth, but it was the size that made him gasp. It was bigger than his pony, twice the size of the largest hound in his father's kennel. "It's no freak," Jon said calmly. "That's a direwolf. They grow larger than any other kind." Theon Greyjoy said, "There's not been a direwolf sighted south of the wall in 200 years. "I see one now," Jon replied. Bran tore his eyes away from the monster. That was when he noticed the bundle in Rob's arms. He gave a cry of delight and moved closer. The pup was a tiny ball of gray and black fur, its eyes still closed. It nuzzled blindly against Rob's chest as he cradled it, searching for milk amongst his leathers, making a sad little whimpery sound. Bran reached out hesitantly. "Go on," Rob told him. "You can touch him." Bran gave the pup a quick nervous stroke, then turned as Jon said, "Here you go." His half-brother put a second pup into his arms. "There are 5 of them." Bran sat down in the snow and hugged the wolf pup to his face. Its fur was soft and warm against his cheek. "Direwolves loose in the realm after so many years?" muttered Hullen, the master of horse. "I like it not." "It's a sign," Jory said. Father frowned. "This is only a dead animal, Jory," he said. Yet he seemed troubled. Snow crunched under his boots and he moved around the body. "Do we know what killed her?" "There's something in the throat," Rob told him, proud to have found the answer before his father even asked. "There, under the jaw." His father knelt and groped under the beast's head with his hand. He gave a yank and held it up for all to see. A foot of shattered antler, tine snapped off, all wet with blood. A sudden silence descended over the party. The men looked at the antler uneasily, and no one dared to speak. Even Bran could sense their fear, though he did not understand. His father tossed the antler to the side and cleansed his hands in the snow. "I'm surprised she lived long enough to whelp," he said. His voice broke the spell. "Maybe she didn't," Jory said. "I've heard tales. Maybe the bitch was already dead when the pups came." "Born with the dead," another man put in. "Worse luck." "No matter," said Hullen. "They be dead soon enough, too." Bran gave a wordless cry of dismay. "The sooner the better," Theon Greyjoy agreed. He drew his sword. Give the beast here, then, Bran." The little thing squirmed against him as if it heard and understood. "No!" Bran cried out fiercely. I was not fiercely. "It's mine!" "Put away your sword, Greyjoy," Robb said. For a moment he sounded as commanding as their father, like the lord he would someday be. "We will keep these pups." You cannot do that, boy, said Harwin, who was Holland's son. It'd be a mercy to kill them, Holland said. Bran looked to his lord father for rescue, but he only got a frown, a furrowed brow. Holland speaks truly, son. Better a swift death than a hard one from cold and starvation. No! He could feel tears welling in his eyes, and he looked away. He did not want to cry in front of his father. Robb insisted stubbornly. Sir Roderick's red bitch whelped again last week, he said. It was a small litter, only 2 live pups. She'll have milk enough. She'll rip them apart when they try to nurse. Lord Stark, Jon said. It was strange to hear him call father that, so formal. Bran looked at him with desperate hope. There are 5 pups, he told father. 3 male, 2 female. What of it, Jon? You have 5 true-born children, Jon said. 3 sons, 2 daughters. The direwolf is the sigil of your house. Your children were meant to have these pups, my lord. Bran saw his father's face change, saw the other man exchange glances. He loved Jon with all his heart that moment. Even at 7, Bran understood what his brother had done. The count had come right only because Jon had omitted himself. He had included the girls, included even Rickon the baby, but not the bastard who bore the surname Snow, the name that custom decreed be given to all those in the north unlucky enough to be born with no name of their own. Their father understood as well. You want no pup for yourself, Jon? He asked softly. The direwolf graces the banners of House Stark, Jon pointed out. I am no Stark, father. Their lord father regarded Jon thoughtfully. Robb rushed into the silence. He left. I will nurse him myself, father, he promised. I will soak a towel with warm milk and give him suck from that. Me too, Bran echoed. The lord weighed his sons long and carefully with his eyes. Easy to say, and harder to do. I will not have you wasting the servants' time with this. If you want these pups, you will feed them yourself. Is that understood? Bran nodded eagerly. The pup squirmed in his grasp, licked at his face with a warm tongue. You must train them well, their father said. You must train them. The kennel master will have nothing to do with these monsters, I promise you that. And the gods help you if you neglect them or brutalize them or train them badly. A direwolf will rip a man's arm off his shoulder as easily as a dog will kill a rat. Are you sure you want this? Yes, father, Bran said. Yes, Robb agreed. The pups may die anyway, despite all you do. They won't die, Robb said. We won't let them die. Keep them then. Jory, Desmond, gather up the other pups. It is time we are back to Winterfell. It was not until they were mounted and on their way that Bran allowed himself to taste the sweet air of victory. By then, his pup was snuggled again inside his leathers, warm against him, safe for the long ride home. Bran was wondering what to name him. Halfway across the bridge, Jon pulled up suddenly. What is it, Jon? Their father asked. Can't you hear it? Bran could hear the wind in the trees, the clatter of their hooves on the ironwood planks, the whimpering of his hungry pup, but Jon was listening to something else. There, Jon said. He swung his horse around and galloped back across the bridge. They watched him dismount where the direwolf lay in the snow, watched him kneel. A moment later, he was riding back to them, smiling. He must have crawled away from the others, Jon said. Or been driven away, their father said, looking at the 6th pup. His fur was white, where the rest of the litter was gray. His eyes were as red as the blood of the ragged man who had died that morning. Bran thought it curious that this pup alone would have opened his eyes while the others were still blind. An albino, Theon Greyjoy said with wry amusement. This one will die even faster than the others. Jon Snow gave his father's ward a long, chilling look. I think not, Greyjoy. This one belongs to me. That is technically where that chapter ends, and I don't feel much inclination to go further. It does appear the next chapter is about a character named Caitlin. It looks like... Oh, either her chapter is very short. And then we go to Daenerys, who I know who that is. Interesting. Let's flip through these pages just a little bit more. Daenerys' chapter is massive. When we go to Eddard, I always just heard people refer to him as Ed, and then John. How long does it take before we get back to somebody we already saw? Just out of curiosity. Back to Caitlyn. Okay. Interesting. So I guess that he just kind of ripped from each character's perspective. It wasn't even a perspective, because Bran wasn't in first-person point of view. He was still in third-person point of view. I guess it's more of like a kind of like an omniscient state of a what is it called? Like a limited third person, of where you are only seeing things from that character's, what happens around that character. Like, we didn't see John ride off and, you know, the actual what he saw there or anything like that. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. I think that's fine, a fine place to stop. I imagine that it'd probably actually be best if I went all the way until we got another character back, or until we had been introduced to as many characters as... there's Arya. And... oh, man. Yeah, he bounces all over the place. I can see how that might be necessary, though, depending on timing. Personally, though, I'm not always on... there's Tyrion. I'm not always on board for character hopping a whole lot. But I also understand with the prospect of how this is a... have I had this hair here the whole time? A political epic fantasy that involves 5 houses. You'd need perspective from all of those houses. I will stop there, though. Hopefully, I've not listened to myself read ever, actually. So hopefully that didn't sound atrocious. Anyway, I will go ahead and pass it back to myself. So, me, have a good time. Enjoy. Good luck. Peace.
A quick transition, and we're back. So, hope you enjoyed that. Just moved back over here. So, again, those energy changes are weird. I was pretty psyched up in the intro, and just kind of chilling out and reading a book kind of just calms you. Even though, I mean, there's like murder and decapitation and shit in that prologue in that first chapter. So we went up to page... that was only 22 pages. 21 pages, actually. And this first novel, Jesus Christ, bro. That's an appendix. Where's the actual last that's also appendix. Appendix. This looks like relatively the last chapter. Sure. This last chapter goes to 807 pages. That is fucking massive. Anyway. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that a lot. Like, I honestly, going through that first prologue, like, the prologue was already super interesting, and I see why he is heralded as well as he is. He is a very good writer. Yeah, it's very good. It's like, and you know, maybe I'm just ignorant on equestrian things, because I definitely don't know what a Garen or a Destrier is, but either those are made up or those are types of horses. I don't know. But thankfully, though, I didn't feel like he made up too much. Those might not even be made up. I literally have no idea. But that said, like, we do know that a couple of things. Everything he presented that wasn't just a normal word, like captain, you know, was still not too far outside of the realm of understanding. Wildling. While we don't know, they end up kind of explaining what wildlings are later in the book. Later in what we read. They don't tell you right out at the very beginning, which is okay though, because when you hear the term wildling or direwolf, you can kind of, your brain, my brain anyway, offers a general idea of what that could be, and that's nice. It's not like a scraglin. Yeah, we'll go with scraglin, even though I think that's a Rick and Morty thing. A scraglin invaded the Hypergorian, and at that point, it's like, I have no idea what you're talking about anymore. Whereas everything there felt like something that I could at least have a relative grasp of what it was and what it was trying to be conveyed to me, and that's good. I appreciate that. That was a very strong beginning, and honestly, while it seems weird to say it like that. Reading that prologue and reading that first chapter that was from Bran Stark's point of view did more for me in terms of being interested in anything this series has to offer than anything anyone else has ever said. Ever. I've had so many people be like, you need to watch this, you need to read this, you need to get into this, you would like this, and I'm like, I don't care. Now, as part of the point of this series is experiencing things that I otherwise wouldn't have. And that was a treasure. That was great. That was enjoyable. I need to work on my reading. And I don't need, I mean, literally my ability to read out loud to others. Hopefully that wasn't too cringy. At least that's what I hope anyway. No, I enjoyed that a lot. And I just kind of enjoyed reading out loud. That was fun. That was nice. I definitely would want to keep reading this. If I will do so, then a completely different question. If you would like to see me read more of it, let me know. Because otherwise, I probably won't. I'll probably just go play video games or watch anime because, let's face it, that's the world we live in. We like instant gratification and things like social media for those dopamine hits. And things like books don't do that as quickly as we would otherwise like. Because that took me a while just to read, 20 pages? Now, I wasn't just, reading in my mind, speed reading through it. I was... Well, as much as it can be said, I was performing for you. So hopefully it was something worthy of watching and listening to. Now, that said, like I said, I would like to read more. That was good. I enjoyed that a lot. And that's more than I expected to be able to say. I honestly expected to not be interested in the series, even by starting with the first book at the first beginning section. Everything, the way that Game of Thrones had been described to me, was this real, and I guess it wasn't very fast moving, but this super slow rolling grind of this political intrigue and a bunch of talking, and I was just not on board for that. But especially because the other side of it is it has all these cool sword fights, they're all super realistic and it's awesome, and it's just cool to see some people fight with swords. I guess, but I can also watch anime that does all of that. No, that was great, though. I enjoyed that. I'm just going to pause there for a second as my thoughts continue to rummage and roll around in my brain. So, yeah, they're still just rolling. My brain's actually just actively thinking about everything I read, which is a testament to the power of what I just read, which is pretty great. It's pretty awesome. It's fun to be able to say that. So, that said, I don't have a lot more to say about it, so we're going to keep on rolling on from there. Our next impression, like I said before, I'm wanting to show you guys more things that we are willing to be part of. It's not just about video games. It's not just about anime. So that's why we did a book today, and that's why our next episode is going to be on a sitcom. At least I believe it's considered a sitcom. Are shows still considered sitcoms? It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which I know nothing about. I could try and tell you more about The Office than I could. Hell, I could tell you more about IT Crowd. I literally know nothing about that either. I know nothing about It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia besides Dennis is the man and Danny DeVito's in it. That's it. I have no other concept of anything the show is about. I also watched a 3-minute clip involving hornets. I think it was hornets or wasps or something like that. Anyway, doesn't matter. Tune in for the next episode if you want to see my first impression of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which I'm sure is probably also pushing copyright limits like Konosuba did. Anyway, not the point. Problem for me, not for you. Problem for later. So with that said, everybody, if this is something that you enjoyed, if you want to see more of this, please hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. We also live stream stuff if you want to catch more of some games. If you enjoyed our Celeste video, we streamed more of that over on our Twitch channel. Again, link is down below. Please catch up with us, follow up with us. If you want to get in contact with us, just chat around. We are on Discord, it's probably the best place. Otherwise, hit us up on Twitter, Instagram. You can drop comments below, anywhere that you like, and we will be sure to see it. We're also always looking for your feedback, so whether you liked or didn't like it, or if you want to see something else, if there's a first impression you want us to do, please get in touch with us as well, comments, or connect with us on any of the previously stated platforms. Otherwise, though, we're going to go ahead and keep working now. Whoo, boy. This is fun and a lot. Production is a lot, especially when it's just me. It's all right. It's all right. I signed up for this. I signed myself up for this. Keep rolling. Keep rolling. All right. Anyway, so seriously, though, if you end up going on to check out another one of our videos, if you do catch out the live stream, thank you and enjoy. Bye.